Hello and welcome to another light reading podcast. This is the Notebook Dump edition, and this will, if you're watching this or listening to it, that means you've probably made it through the week. So this is the week ending Friday, March the 10th. Is that where we are? Wow. How did we get 10 days into March already? What's happening? Anyway, before I have an existential crisis, let me introduce and say hello to the team joining us. We have Nicole Ferraro in New York. We have Kelsey Zeiser in North Carolina, or maybe South Carolina. I can never get the Carolinas correct.
North Carolina. We were actually, quick story. We were driving yesterday to Target, and there was a car in front of us with all these like Doodle Mom and like I love my dog stickers. And the license plate said Wiggle Wagon. And we love dogs, but my husband was like, Wiggle Wagon, that's too much. And it was a South Carolina plate, so we're like, boo.
Oh, okay.
What does that mean?
Wiggle Wagon? Like,
I don't know.
I guess they're just really, she loves dogs. She had like 2 Doodle Mom stickers on there, so.
Really okay.
Right.
Like
if you're a Doodle Mom and you're
South Carolina or something. Anyway.
Oh.
But I'm definitely in North Carolina, the better of the Carolinas.
That's right. The more sophisticated of the Carolinas.
You are constantly trying to start a civil war on this podcast.
They just have the dogs. They don't need to brag about them on their vehicle.
We get it.
Anyway, well, Kelsey is in the more sophisticated Carolina, and Jeff Baumgartner is joining us from way outside of Denver, or just outside of Denver. I'm not sure where you live, Jeff.
Yeah, Highlands Ranch. It's it's the Wild West out here, you know.
Okay, very
Going
good.
to the saloon later to play some cards, you know.
You might see Mike there. Mike is also in the Denver metro area.
I live in the saloon, and I'm actually shocked that there's 2 Carolinas. That's where I'm stopping.
When did this happen?
In North Carolina's mind, there's only one Carolina.
Wait till we tell Mike about the Virginias. Let's just table that for later.
What? What about the Dakotas?
What is a Virginia?
Nothing. Never mind. Moving on. Let's see. So let's get into what fell out of our notebooks this week. So I'll start and I'll go as quickly as I can, but there's a lot of junk to mention because I just got back from OFC, which is optical networking heaven, and spoke to a lot of people who used a lot of words that I couldn't understand. Talked about concepts that I will never get my head around because optics is just hard stuff.
Do you still feel coherent after?
Yes, I do actually. Just like Mobile World Congress, the web scales companies, the hyperscalers, the cloud providers, whatever you want to call them, they had, their influence was felt all over the show, especially with data center optics, because, in the data center, the big push is to replace, not just the current sort of equipment with newer equipment that's, more high bandwidth, but even down to the chip level, they're replacing, every little copper connection at the chip level. They're trying to speed that up and take fiber, chip to chip fiber optic technology and something called co-packaged optics, which is basically that. It's just speeding up the connections between processors and allowing for faster data processing and storage and stuff that's going to help out AI and machine learning applications. And in the data center itself, the trend is it seems to be that everyone's working toward designing equipment and pushing technology to where the network is just as flat as possible. And we've just got servers talking directly to one another with as few hops or other pieces of equipment in the way. And, and that's quite hard to do at the data rates that they're wanting to do it at. So we're talking, we're at 400 gigabits per second now in those sort of connections, and that's going to be popular for a while. That's going to move to 800 gigabits per second, and then we're into the 1.6 terabits per second range. So there was a lot happening in terms of data center optics, and then there was also service provider activity. One of the ones of note was Windstream using some pluggable optics from Cisco or Acacia, which is part of Cisco now, They talked about a live network trial that they had where they demonstrated a 1 terabit per second wave or optical wavelength. They were able to put 1 terabit per second on a single optical wavelength, transmit that over more than 540 kilometers. That's basically the distance between Dallas and Tulsa, Oklahoma. Where they have two parts of their network or network hubs. And in that same trial, they were able to loop an 800 gigabit per second link over that network. So, send it all the way up and send it all the way back. So it wasn't just a one-way hero experiment. And what they demonstrated with that is that Acacia's pluggable at that bandwidth level, 1.2 terabits per second, is basically ready for sampling for customers. So they've validated that the thing really does work. It really can handle live network traffic, and it really can compress all that data onto a single optical wavelength. So for service providers, all of that stuff just means that it's going to be a future where they can transmit more data down the fiber that's existing in their network, saving them, money, space, power, and all those good things, and also giving them, plenty of headroom to upgrade certain links on certain parts of their networks where that stuff makes sense. So, and at OFC in general, the tendency at the show is to talk about and demonstrate what's coming up. And that's why I like the show a lot, because really in real life, people are barely deploying 800 gigabit per second. And at the show, they were talking about 1.6 terabits as though, it was yesterday's news. So it's it's a really, really interesting show for that reason. And those are kind of the two big trends, terabit per second transmission on the service provider side, and flat, fast server to server network communications within the data center. And pretty much everybody agrees that as we progress more and more into AI clusters or AI inside, AI processing inside the data center, it is truly going to sort of change the way that data centers are built and how they look in the future. That was about it from OFC. Let's go around the horn now, as I'm tired of talking, and you're probably tired of hearing me. Let's see. Let's go back to New York. And Nicole, what's been happening in your world this week?
Live from New York, Gigi Sohn is not going to be the FCC commissioner.
What?
Womp, womp, womp. Very
after all that
publicized news. Yeah. So she officially withdrew this week, as everybody likely already knows. That comes after 3 nomination hearings, after being renominated by President Biden earlier this year, which, suggested that he thought he had the votes for this thing. I think she specifically said on, I guess, what was this, Tuesday? I've lost track of time and space, but she said the night before she told President Biden that she was withdrawing because of the, intense lobbying battle against her from telecom lobbyists and right-wing news organizations. But I think it's notable that on Tuesday, Senator Joe Manchin confirmed he wasn't going to be voting for her, a Democrat, a necessary vote. I assume she got word of that before officially withdrawing her nomination. And I may have said this before, but during her 3rd hearing, the Republicans were specifically trying to get him to vote against her. They raised an issue that this is pretty far-fetched, but that she had tweeted, fundraising support for some liberal group that at some point in time then put up billboard saying that Senator Manchin is corrupt. So I think like Senator Cruz or somebody raised that in Gigi's last hearing to be like, you think Senator Manchin is corrupt? And she was like, of course not, whatever. So anyway, it appears that along with everything else worked. And so now it's completely unclear what President Biden does next in terms of a nominee, how long, who could even get confirmed by the Senate at this point, and what of his telecom agenda is still on the table besides what's already been passed by Congress. So it's pretty disappointing and gross, in my opinion, what we've seen go down with this nomination. And it tells a larger story about the country overall, but don't let me get started on that.
Could I be confirmed as an FCC commissioner if I said it would not surprise me if Senator Joe Manchin were corrupt? Is that safe?
I don't think so. I don't think you're allowed to say anything except we love you, Senator Joe Manchin.
He is corrupt. I'm just saying that my personal reaction to that news would be, were it true, would just be,
were it true.
Oh, that sounds about right.
There's no suggestion whatsoever.
So you want to just like live in the gray area, and that's.
I mean, I would say you have as much of a chance of getting confirmed at this point as anybody else. So call up Prezi B.
Is there any? I'm sorry to interrupt, but is there any feeling yet in terms of? I mean, this thing's been deadlocked forever. So, is there any estimation or speculation on how much longer this situation is going to continue? I imagine through the whole term, basically. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I haven't, I'm not hearing anything in terms of like who people expect next. I am hearing frustration with everybody involved. There was already anger with President Biden for taking so long to name his nominees. And then we had, the Republicans launched these attacks against her, but the Democrats didn't really help. We had former Senator Heidi Heitkamp, Democrat, launching this campaign against Gigi as like our opponent to rural broadband because she was associated with a PAC that was being funded by Comcast and AT&T. And then there was no, it didn't seem to many that President Biden was throwing his weight behind her to really move this thing ahead. Yet he renominated her, which only, forced her to endure further attacks and not get the support that I guess they thought she was going to get. So in terms of I haven't heard any names being floated. And the Senate is like in such a precarious position. I mean, today, Senator McConnell's in the hospital. We had Senator, what's his face? Fetterman. Fetterman in the hospital like last week. And it's basically a deadlocked Senate. Senator Sinema has become an independent. So who knows where she stands on anything except the consultants who fund her. But I don't know. So it remains unclear. And now, as of today, we start a budget fight. So
those are always nice.
Yeah. That'll be smooth, I'm sure. So.
Oh, no problem. Yeah, no problems ahead.
Agreement on how
rubber
to
stamp it all. Boom, we're done.
Yep.
Okay, well So anything coming out of the FCC is going to be either deadlocked or a complete mess in the next couple of years. So let's just hold on to that. Kelsey, you've looking like you've had a sip of tea or something. You feel like talking a little bit?
Yeah, I've got tea and coffee going, and water, all the liquids.
Well, what's been in your notebook this week?
Well, I had kind of a fun story from MWC last week that I wanted to go over. Met with Nokia at the event, and they had a demo set up about they're planning a lunar mission that's set for launch later this year, and it's going to be on the south pole of the moon, and they're launching a rover and a lander that will create a 4G LTE network in space. How do you like that?
Fantastic.
And so it'll be useful for further space missions in the future to show that they can use cellular technology, and from the rover they can stream real-time video and data back to mission control. And some of their partners in it are SpaceX, NASA, NTIA, and Intuitive Machines.
Wow.
Moon broadband. Cool. That's cool.
Yeah. So it's going to be about a 2-week-long mission, and then I guess we'll see where they go from there, like applying that technology to future missions, potentially Mars, which I still don't understand why anyone wants to go to Mars, but that's besides the point.
Well, but as long as you can get Netflix there,
right?
I'm there. No.
You just have to tell Netflix that you're traveling to Mars so that your password works.
Exactly.
Yeah. Right.
Oh, yeah. It's like your location doesn't seem to fit with your profile. It says you're...
Yeah, that's the only hiccup here.
Yeah. You're in a different orbit and all this.
You're on a different planet, usually, when you log in.
Yeah, they're going to have to come up with the Mars policy and moon policy. Yeah.
Oh,
they got some stuff to do.
But streaming politics was difficult now. We have other planets to contend with. But Kelsey, that's a good story. I like the idea of getting cat videos from the moon or whatever it is they're going to be distributing. But I wonder, and I also am curious, like if we find out after the fact, it'd be interesting after the mission is over for them to report on what modifications they had to make and all the equipment, like how they changed, whether they had to change anything once it left our atmosphere, what still worked, what didn't.
Yeah.
That sort of
I mean,
thing.
they did mention that, like, weight is always something that's really challenging. So even just in the design of the rover, there's a lot to factor in, and it's very expensive to get any of that stuff up there. So it'll be expensive Netflix.
Especially right before spring break, the rover wants to look good without its shirt on. Spring break humor, everybody. Come on.
We had to etch in some abs.
All right, before I totally bring this to a screeching halt, Jeff, what happened?
It's a great way to introduce Jeff.
Yeah.
Before we go off the rails, Jeff.
I've been in the tanning bed, and I'm getting ready. To head out to spring break.
There's zero sun in Rancho. Where are you again? Rancho.
Highlands Ranch.
I'm thinking of Rancho Murrieta in California, but
yeah, I live at the OK Corral.
I mean, if the extreme weather keeps happening, Jeff will have beachfront property in a couple of years. So,
so I'm kind of like banking on that, actually. Yeah.
Bought early. Anyway, what are you up to?
Well, let's see. No moon broadband or anything, but this week we did start to see some of the big service providers start to do their like after earnings, in between earnings talks with all the financial bigwigs. And this week started with the Morgan Stanley event, if I'm recalling correct. So Charter and Comcast are among those presenting. I mean, nothing too mind blowing, but more about variations on the theme is what I would say. Fixed wireless access. Every time they got to bring it up, right? And I think the cable guys aren't dismissing the overall threat, but they are seeing the greatest competitive threat, at least on the lower end of the market, according to them. And they still view fixed wireless as inferior to wireline and argue that they're going to have trouble keeping up with the pace of data demand, and they're going to face a capacity crunch. So that's all, again, just kind of reiterating and updating their thoughts there. But, but I thought one of the interesting nuggets that come out of it was the talk with Charter CEO Chris Winfrey had to do with DOCSIS, right? Because we all know DOCSIS 4.0 is going to be the focus for HFC network upgrades in the coming years. And I think the people in the industry we talk to a lot kind of debate whether 4.0 is the last chapter for DOCSIS, and maybe the leap beyond that will be fiber to the prem. What will be the next thing after 4.0? Well, maybe not. I mean, Winfrey put out there that maybe the story won't stop there. It's not really an unfounded idea. The cable's been, some of the engineers and standards folks have been looking to extend the plant to 3 gigahertz up from 1.8 gigahertz, which is the big focus for 4.0. I can't really discount what Winfrey said, but I'll be surprised really if something follows 4.0. Of course, something like that's not going to enter play for many years. I mean, we'll all hopefully be retired by then, but it's something that we're going to be discussing next week. I got to throw in the shameless plug that Light Reading is going to be hosting our annual Cable Next Gen event in Denver next week, and it'll be the first time we're going to do the event live and in person since 2019. So looking forward to that next week, seeing some of you there, and seeing what the industry has to say going forward, because a lot of the upgrade activity is definitely picking up. So we'll have a lot to talk about.
Just a quick reminder to the cable industry: there's no better way to remind folks that you're that you're not worried about a competitive technology than to bring it up every single earnings call over and over and over again.
That's right. This thing we're not worried about. Let's dig into that some more. Yeah.
Doesn't signal worry or concern at all.
And all the analysts love to ask them the question. It's just it's like this unavoidable thing, but they kind of get their message points figured out.
That's always my favorite part of any earnings call. The analysts, I'm like, what are they going to ask? Better be something good. And it usually is. Yeah. They're like, could you put a little color on?
You get off script finally. Yeah, when you get to that point, which is nice.
Great, yeah.
Speaking of off script, let's go to Mike Dano. And Mike, in the true, I'll ask this like a financial analyst. Great quarter, Mike. Is there any way you could give us a little bit of color on what happened this week?
Yeah, synergy fill, and also financials and business transformation. Yeah. So, and in conclusion, profits.
What's your backlog look like? Got a big backlog of...
I think there's a policy against asking that.
Yeah, it's as pretty as my bottom line, Chelsea.
Oh, dear.
Oh boy.
Anyway,
just talk about or something.
So out of my notebook is it's basically the same thing that Jeff was talking about. I listened to the same investor conference this week, and we got a good view of basically what the 5G strategy is for 2023 from AT&T and Verizon and T-Mobile, and there was no surprises. But what we did get, so basically it's like T-Mobile is going to keep doing its thing, and AT&T is going to keep doing its thing. That was their messages. But Verizon talked about some of the changes that they're going to make. So they completely blew up the front office. They've got basically all new executives. They've got a new head of networks. They've got a new head of consumer. They've got a new head of business, and they're looking for a new CFO. But Hans Vestberg, the CEO, is still there. And then just today we saw that they're going to offer Netflix for free for a year. So Verizon is still working on trying to figure out the right strategy to go to market. And we'll see how that plays out this year, but they're in a little state of flux. So that's what I got mostly from the conferences this week.
I guess that Albert Einstein commercial didn't save the company.
Oh, so. I kind of like that commercial.
I liked it the first 400 times true. I saw it. Yeah. 401, starting to wear me down a little bit.
It is on a lot.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens with Verizon. I mean, it is, it starts at the top. So, I mean, maybe Mr. Vestberg has a better fix on where he wants to take the company, and he'll put the right staff in place, and we'll wait and see.
We'll see. Yeah, he's the chairman and CEO, and so I think it's a little hard for him to leave. He's really entrenched there, and so I've heard discussions that he might be on his way out at some point, but they're finding a replacement for him is real hard.
Yeah, we'll be looking forward to some more color on that in the future.
Yeah.
I think that's a great place to leave it now. Okay, well that wraps up the Notebook Dump. If you want to hear more from Kelsey, from Mike, from Nicole, or from Jeff, please do check out the Light Reading Daily newsletter at lightreading.com. And on behalf of those folks and myself, have a great weekend. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.